Hello and welcome to this demonstration of the RPA Supervisor. The RPA Supervisor is a tool that sits on top of your existing RPA solutions and is built to optimize your license capacity to automate your RPA operations. As a digital RPA Supervisor, it works 24/7 to increase your license utilization, reduce the amount of time you spent on monitoring and run tasks, and to reduce the response times of the incoming work. Right from the start, we wanted to help create a more business-oriented digital workforce. Now, the main concept to achieve that is to move away from static time-based scheduling to a business-driven dynamic SLA-based scheduling. And by monitoring all aspects of your RPA operations, all of your incoming work, all of your resources, and knowing the business requirements of all of your processes, the RPA Supervisor is able to increase license utilization by at least 50%, reducing FTE cost in your run team by 75%, and reduce the response times by 85%. It also handles 80 to 90% of events affecting your operations automatically, providing a much more stable workforce than was previously possible. The Advanced Notification and Reporting Center also ensures that both business users and Center of Excellence users are always informed of all aspects of your operations. Installing and implementing the RPA Supervisor is easy and can be done in a matter of days without modifying existing automated processes. It's available as an on-premise solution or as a cloud service. We also have human-in-the-loop functionality and offer minute-based RPA licensing options. All this combined guarantees you a higher return on investment on your RPA initiative. It provides improvements for all of your RPA stakeholders, and it allows for faster and more efficient scaling of your RPA journey. Let's move on to see how this all works in practice. The Supervisor monitors all aspects of your RPA operations. It monitors all of your resource PCs, the license usage, workload, exceptions, and the value creation. And because of this, we're able to provide you with dashboards with all of that information. This dashboard is all customizable, so for groups or for each individual, and you can set them by different departments, the different processes, everything combined. You can move them around to where you would want to see the information. You can change the time periods and so on. Now, the first thing you do after installing the Supervisor is to have a look at the configuration. Now, first of all, you'll see that all of your work queues, your runtime resources, your processes, and all of your credentials have already been loaded into the RPA Supervisor database. So all you need to do is decide how you want the Supervisor to handle lock screen issues, reboot options, and logging in and logging out of your resource PCs. Once that is done, the next step is to set up your resources. So you see everything is loaded in here. All you need to do, if you want or if you need, you can set up the default users, the robot users, to be logged into each individual resource PC. You can also create your resource groups. So typically you need to set up different groups for the different departments and so on. So you can set up operations, resources here, and you can add the resources that should be available in this resource group. And that's it. You can also create credential pools. So that means you can group your credentials into, for instance, HR users, admin users, operations users, and so on. Next step is to set up your user roles. So the user authorization levels are very finely grained, but you typically have your admins, view only, process owners, your Center of Excellence run team, and so on. And you've also got what we call workflow roles, which is business process rules, to control access to each of your workflows. As soon as you've set up your main configurations, your resources, your groups and roles, you can start onboarding your processes. Now, as I mentioned, the main concept of the RPA Supervisor is to move away from static, time-based scheduling to business-driven, dynamic, SLA-based scheduling. And the way we do this is that we've created workflows. Each workflow represents a business process, like all of these. And one workflow typically consists of one or more RPA processes. So this example, for registering credit card, you've got one process that loads the queue with work items and one process that works all of those items. That could be multiple processes doing different parts of that process, and you can have a reporting process at the end. This is where you also define ownership of those workflows to make it easier to report efficiently, and these users can also subscribe to notifications regarding this workflow and the processes within it. You also set up the benefits, so the basis for the value reporting, where you set up how much time is saved per item, for instance, or the value in monetary terms, if you prefer that. And that allows us to provide you with live value reporting in the dashboard. The difference between a process and a task is that a task is a process with all of the operational parameters attached to it. And to show how all that works, I'll show you how to onboard a new process. First to do is to choose the process, of course. So let's just pretend it's the register credit card. You can here choose to override the default user for the resource PC which is running it. If you have special requirements, it needs to be a specific user, or maybe you can choose from a group of users in your credential pools that you've created. For the operational parameters, you need to choose set the response time, the working hours, the resource group, and the trigger. In Supervisor, we've got several different triggers, the most important one being pending items in a queue. But for those processes where you don't have a queue to work from, you can trigger a process by choosing a time interval trigger, a file system trigger, a sequence trigger, or by manual request, and that's also available as an API. For the time interval ones, you can choose to run it every minute, every 15 minutes, or every however many hours, every day, work days, months. And it's also important for those processes that you don't run often, so it's a batch type job, that you can set your retry options. So maybe you need to make sure it's performed a completed session, or at least one item has been produced. If you choose a session, how many times it should retry, and for how long it should wait between retries. For instance, retry 5 times, wait 2 minutes between each retry. One of the good things about the time trigger in RPA Supervisor is that even if you set up 5 processes to run at the same time on the same resource PC, you won't have a scheduling crash. The supervisor will just prioritize them according to their individual SLAs. So you can never have a scheduling crash in the RPA Supervisor. The next option is to trigger a process based on a file or a folder being created, changed, renamed, or deleted. You can also use a sequence, so start this task after this, for instance. And it might be particularly interesting if you have a cleanup process. So you say, well, if this process fails, then run this process to clean it up. And then you've got manual request, which you can also use an API for. But as I mentioned, the most commonly used pending items in a queue. Then of course you need to choose the queue, and again it's taken straight from the from the Blue Prism database in this case. And then you can also filter based on the tagging you use for each item. So if you're using tagging today, you can set the tag filter you want the same way as you do in your RPA tool. And this task would only pick items with that matching that tag filter. The next thing to set is the response time, which I mentioned is the most important prioritizing factor. And you can set, so it should be started within 1 minute, maybe 10 minutes, 1 hour, 4 hours, 8 hours, 72 hours or a week. That all depends on the requirements for your particular business. So if you, for instance, say started within 10 minutes, that's a very high priority process. And that means as soon as there's an item in the queue, the supervisor will make sure that it starts working on that item within 10 minutes. The prioritization is relative for all of these. The supervisor will always try to complete all work as quickly as it can, but it will be based on the priorities between all the processes and items. So it's a complex algorithm taking into account starting up and closing downtime, if it needs to log out or log in a user, and so on. But the main factor in prioritizing is to complete work as far away from the deadline as possible. And the response time is where you need to challenge the business, talk to the process owners. You've got a 24-hour SLA today. What happens if we can deliver it in 10 minutes or 1 minute? Does that mean you can improve your process? Does it mean you can deliver higher value to your customers or other departments in the organization? Maybe increase sales, reduce losses, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you don't need it for 72 hours. Well, then you should choose 72 hours, and that will allow you to get higher utilization. But this is where you should focus on the business requirement and what's creating value for the business. The next parameter to set is the working hours. Now, the working hours are slightly different from what you have in your RPA tools, in that it's not when the robots are supposed to work, it's when they are allowed to work. And you typically set up a few standard working hour shifts. So 24/7, 24/5, banking hours, extended banking hours, maybe an evening shift and a night shift. So if we have a look at the 24/7 one, you'll see it's actually a shift plan. So you can create your own calendars for what's holidays or non-working days. And then you've got your shift plan. So in this example, there's a maintenance window between 2 and 3 a.m. on all weekdays, and then between 11 in the evening and 5 in the afternoon on Saturdays and Sundays, and 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. on non-working days. And you can create as many of these as you like, but it just makes it very flexible in how you operate. The next step is to set up the resource group. Resource group is similar to what you've got in your RPA tools. So if we choose credit department for this one, for instance, you can see which resource pieces are a member of this group. But you could also say that even though there are 8 resource pieces available or members of this group, you might say, well, the credit department can only use 4 parallel sessions. So that just gives added flexibility. In this case, we don't want to do that, so we'll leave it like that. And that's how you onboard a new process. Once you've set that, you can also define the underperformance criteria. So the process terminations, if it doesn't complete item, if there's a frozen session, and a few elements like that, and you can configure how the RPA Supervisor should handle those situations. And that's it. That's how you onboard a process in the RPA Supervisor. Now the supervisor will monitor all of your file-based, time-based, and most importantly, queue-based work coming in. It monitors all of your resource PCs, and it knows the SLAs of all of your processes. This allows the supervisor to, every few seconds, calculate what's the optimal prioritization and use of the resources. So if it's working with low priority items, using all of your resources on medium to low priority items, and then you get high priority items in one of your queues, the supervisor will immediately send stop requests to resources working on lower priority items, stop those, and start working on the higher priority items. And it does this 24/7. It is this constant prioritization that allows the RPA supervisor to improve your license utilization by at least 50%, in effect giving you a 50% increase in your RPA capacity. It also drives the responsiveness of your digital workforce. So on average, it reduces response times from work is available until your digital workforce has completed it by between 85 and 95%, creating much better service to your business and to their customers. However, the RPA Supervisor is more than just an orchestration tool. It actually does automate your RPA operations. It's like your own in-house managed service. Because it monitors all of your infrastructure and all of your SLAs and all of your processes, it will detect anything that's not going according to plan and register this as events. These events are registered here in the events page, and they are typically SLA breach or breach of deadline, resource PCs being unavailable, slow, processes underperforming, frozen sessions, pending sessions, issues like that. Now, most of these issues the RPA supervisor will be able to handle. If there are events that the supervisor cannot handle, such as someone unplugging the power cord, it will at least minimize the impact of such events by assigning all work to other resource PCs. As a user, you can subscribe to notifications regarding any event that's created. The events are typically set up based on task or resources. So if you're looking for task related event, you might, as an employee of the Center of Excellence, you want notifications concerning all workflows. As a business user, you might only be concerned with and only see the workflows that you have ownership of. And then you can choose between a set of conditions, so a session freeze, started, terminated, completed, underperforming tasks, and deadline exceeded. Deadline exceeded is the condition that's most important to business users and process owners, and they like to be notified. And the RPA supervisor doesn't wait until the deadline has been exceeded. It will warn as soon as it calculates that a deadline will be exceeded in the future, giving the Center of Excellence and the business time to prioritize other processes lower for a period, or give users to handle the extra load or warn customers. For Center of Excellence or technical resources, you also want to know the status of all of your resources, your resource PCs, and you've got a few other options there as well. But again, session freezes, terminations, resource offline, and too few resources available, and so on. All of these notifications can be delivered in the dashboard here or via email or both. And we're also setting up integration now with WhatsApp. With all of this set up, all the Center of Excellence and the process owners needs to do is to lean back, see the results, value creation, and all the statistics you get in your dashboard. And unless you get a notification, the supervisor has your back, and you can trust that your RPA operations is running smoothly. And in fact, what we see from our customers where we've done metrics is that there's a 75% savings on run cost from your center of excellence, which you can then use to create new processes and drive more benefits for your organization. And there are two more features, RPA Supervisor, that will help you drive efficiency in your organization and get more out of your digital workforce. One is RPA license capacity on a pay-as-you-use basis. So you can go in and define the time period you need extra licenses. I don't know, maybe 10 extra, and then you can create a shift plan. So maybe you only need extra between 12 and 18 on weekdays, maybe you only need them on Fridays or towards the end of the month, and so on. You can create as many shifts as you like. It will send an order, and for all managed service provider customers, we can then provide licenses for you. The RPA Supervisor will actually install your licenses just in time for when you need them, and uninstall them once you're done with them for the day. So that's one way to drive efficiency. So you don't need to buy more licenses than you need for your average consumption, and then for your peak consumption you just buy for those extra few hours or days that you need them. The other feature we've got is a human in the loop or robot interaction, where there are two ways of doing that. One is where you, in Blue Prism, you create a process, and from that process the supervisor will read and create a form. So it's a static form, so you can input when to or information about, get me information about this customer if it's a call center, or what products does this customer have, or what's the status of item so and so. You can enter that, place a start order. That will go straight to the queue. Depending on the prioritization you've set, it will be handled in that order. The other option is where you've got a dynamic form, where your process has built in that if it runs into any issues it can't handle, it can notify the users through the RPA Supervisor interface. So for this example, process tried to read an invoice but didn't manage to get the total sum and the account number right. So it provides the user with the link to the document and asks for the information that it couldn't find itself, and then you can send it back. You can also combine the two. So you might have a static form where you're asking for information, and then the robots will return the results to you in here, and you can open it up. It's a communication between the user and the robots. This functionality is also available via APIs, and we are creating connectors for the Microsoft platform, Appian, OutSystem, SharePoint, most CRM systems, to make it easy to consume robotic capacity in general, but also to use the human in the loop interface for organizations that do not want to use or to add one more user interface for their users. That concludes this demonstration. I hope you got a good insight into what the RPA Supervisor can do for your organization. If you have any questions or would like more information, please contact us at www.rpasupervisor.com. Thank you and have a nice day.